Anatomy of the Spirit, Chapter 1. Energy Medicine and Intuition. I disappoint some people when I discuss intuition because I firmly believe that intuitive or symbolic sight is not a gift but a skill based in self-esteem. Developing this skill and a healthy sense of self becomes easier when you can think in the words, concepts, and principles of energy medicine. So as you read this chapter, think of learning to use intuition as learning to interpret the language of energy. The human energy field. Everything that is alive pulsates with energy, and all of this energy contains information. While it is not surprising that practitioners of alternative or complementary medicine accept this concept, even some quantum physicists acknowledge the existence of an electromagnetic field generated by the body's biological processes. Scientists accept that the human body generates electricity because living tissue generates energy. Your physical body is surrounded by an energy field that extends as far out as your outstretched arms and the full length of your body. It is both an information center and a highly sensitive perceptual system. We are constantly in communication with everything around us through this system, which is a kind of conscious electricity that transmits and receives messages to and from other people's bodies. These messages from and within the energy field are what intuitives perceive. Practitioners of energy medicine believe that the human energy field contains and reflects each individual's energy. It surrounds us and carries with us the emotional energy curated by our internal and external experiences, both positive and negative. This emotional force influences the physical tissue within our bodies. In this way, your biography, that is, the experiences that make up your life, become your biology. Experiences that carry emotional energy in our energy systems include past and present relationships, both personal and professional, profound or traumatic experiences and memories, and belief patterns, attitudes, including all spiritual and superstitious beliefs. The emotions from these experiences become encoded in our biological systems and contribute to the formation of our cell tissue, which then generates a quality of energy that reflects these emotions. These energy impressions form an energy language, which carries literal and symbolic information that a medical intuitive can read. There is an example of the kind of message the energy field may communicate. Let's say you had some trouble with math when you were in elementary school. Knowing the fact that 12 makes a dozen would not ordinarily carry an emotional charge, such as would alter the health of cell tissues. On the other hand, if you were humiliated by the teacher because you didn't know that fact, the experience would carry an emotional charge that would create cellular damage, especially if you were to dwell on that memory through adulthood or use it as a touchstone for determining how to deal with criticism or authority figures or education or failure. An intuitive might pick up the literal image of your exchange with the teacher and any other negative symbol linked to that experience. Positive images and the energy of positive experiences are also held in the energy field. Think of a time when someone praised you for a job well done, or a kind act, or for some help that you gave someone. You feel a positive energy, a surge for personal power within your body. Positive and negative experiences register a memory in cell tissue as well as the energy field. As neurobiologist Dr. Candace Pert has proven, neuropeptides, the chemicals triggered by emotions, are thoughts converted into matter. Our emotions reside physically in our bodies and interact with our cells and tissues. In fact, Dr. Pert can no longer separate the mind from the body, she says, because the same kinds of cells that manufacture and receive emotional chemistry in the brain are present throughout the entire body. Sometimes the body responds emotionally, and manufactures emotional chemicals, even before the brain has registered a problem. Remember, for instance, how quickly your body reacts to a loud noise before you've had time to think. As Dr. Pert said on Bill Moyer's Healing the Mind, clearly, there's another form of energy that we have not yet understood. For example, there's a form of energy that appears to leave the body when the body dies. Your mind is in every cell of your body, Moyer says. You're saying that my emotions are stored in my body? Dr. Pert says, absolutely. You didn't realize that? There are so many phenomena that we can't explain without going into energy. Reading the field. In addition to reading specific traumatic childhood experiences, sometimes an intuitive can even pick up on superstitions, personal habits, behavior patterns, moral beliefs, and preferences in music and literature. At other times, the energy impressions are more symbolic. For instance, from one patient who was suffering from tightness of breath, I kept receiving the symbolic impression of him being shot in the heart before a sparring squad. Obviously, this had not literally happened to him, but he had undergone extensive medical tests, which could locate no known physical cause for his condition. After I shared my impression with him, he told me that his wife had betrayed him several times with other men, and being shot through the heart is exactly how he felt about her actions. By admitting these emotions, which he had previously tried to ignore, he was able to address the problems in both his marriage and in his health. Our emotional energy converts into biological matter through a highly complex process. Just as radio stations operate according to specific energy wavelengths, each organ and system in the body is calibrated to absorb and process specific emotional psychological energies. That is, each area of the body transmutes energy on a specific detailed frequency. And when we are healthy, all are in tune. An area of the body that is not transmuting at its normal frequency indicates the location of a problem. A change in intensity of the frequency indicates a change in the nature and seriousness of the illness and reveals the stress pattern that has contributed to the development of the illness. This way of interpreting the body's energy is something called vibrational medicine. It resembles the most ancient medical practices and beliefs, from Chinese medicine to indigenous shamanic practices, to virtually every folk or alternative therapy. The truth is that energy medicine is not new, but I believe my interpretation of it and how you can use it to heal spiritually in conjunction with contemporary medical treatments is unique. If a person is able to sense intuitively that he or she is losing energy because of a stressful situation and then acts to correct that loss of energy, then the likelihood of that stress developing into physical crisis is reduced, if not eliminated completely. While I can parse the language of every energy for you so that you can begin to see and feel the human energy field, begin to understand its corresponding spiritual anatomy, begin to know the sources of your personal power, and begin to develop your own intuition. I have some trouble explaining exactly how I personally acquire energy information. Other intuitives appear to have the same difficulty, but we all pick up on information that has the strongest impulse, the most intensity. These impulses usually relate directly to the part of the human body that is becoming weakened or diseased. As a rule, a person's energy system transmits only the information that is essential to bring the conscious mind to an awareness of the imbalance or disease. Like the shot in the heart image, symbolic information can sometimes be disturbing, but this intensity is necessary in order that the body's message can break through the habitual mental or emotional patterns that cause the disease to form in the very first place. Medical intuitions cooperate with the body's intention to promote its own health and life. That is, our energy will always seek health, in spite of what we may do to ourselves physically. For example, we tell a lie. Our energy field would often communicate with the other person the energy fact that we are not telling the truth. Energy does not and cannot lie. Stay with your first impression. When you receive an intentional impression about yourself or the person you are reading, pay attention to whatever image comes up. Most people are looking for safe intuitions, not healthy ones, and safe insights, not healthy insights, because they usually want a safe passage into the future, into the unknown. So you may be tempted to dismiss a disturbing energy that you receive, or one that is not congruent with your own desires, or those of the person you are reading. Most people who come to me for an evaluation have already intuited themselves that something is wrong, but they are hoping that I will give the feeling some other meaning, such as you're merely going through a natural body change, but nothing is wrong with you physically. But it is important to tell people the truth, not what they want to hear. Again and again, I have had to confirm the negative intuitive impressions of people seeking my help. Their abilities are as accurate as mine. These people know they are ill, but since I do not share their fear, my intuitions can interpret their data better than they can themselves. People must face that which they fear. For instance, in the case of the man shot through the heart, it seemed on the surface safer to him to avoid confronting his adulterous wife with his suspicions that she was cheating on him. Instead of acting on his intuitions, he directed his hurt and anger underground into his body, which manifested eventually as chest pains. His body and spirit were striving to wake him up to the need to deal with his wife's cheating. But as so many people do, he had hoped that by not confronting the problem, it would just go away. His body, however, revealed that the true cost of this safe approach was a challenge to his health. This man's story illustrates how powerful intuitions really are, and how they can break through the most determined mindset to lead us toward healing. Life is painful at times, and spiritually, we are meant to face the pains that life presents. In the Western world, however, we often misrepresent God's plan for us and expect life to be comfortable and free of trouble. We measure God's presence in our lives by the level of personal comfort. We believe God is here if our prayers are answered, but neither God nor Buddha nor any other spiritual leader or tradition guarantees or encourages a pain-free life. Spiritual teachings encourage us to grow past and through painful experiences, each of which is a spiritual lesson. Developing intuitive ability will help us learn the lessons inherent in our experiences. Have a reflective state of mind. There is no one formula by which you can develop your intuition. Some people develop it through meditation or as a result of mastering a certain talent or sport. I have often heard people say that intuitive ability is the result of a spiritual lifestyle, but that is not accurate. Intuitive ability is present in everyone because it is a survival skill, not a spiritual intention. Maintaining a reflective and meditative attitude, however, facilitates your reception of intuitions. Objectivity will help you interpret the impressions you receive and put them into a symbolic, spiritual context. Objectivity is key. I learned through experience to discern the difference between personal and impersonal impressions. My indicator of an accurate intuition is a lack of emotion. For me, a clear impression has no emotional energy connected to it whatsoever. If I feel an emotional connection to an impression, then I consider that impression to be contaminated. The person you are reading, however, will often feel some emotional charge from the impression you receive. For me, impressions are neither auditory nor visual. Rather, they are like quick mental images that contain a very subtle electrical current. As I scan someone's body, I focus on each energy center and wait for an image. After about 5 seconds, the energy process starts, and it continues to unfold until it stops on its own. The duration varies from person to person. Reading some people requires almost an hour, while others takes less than 10 minutes. Every now and again, I can encounter a person whom I cannot read or help. I can only speculate on why this is so. A few times I was left with the feeling that nothing I had said would make any sense to them. And at other times I had the impression that the person was looking for only a very specific type of answer that I could not provide, such as why their marriage had failed. Also, I am virtually useless to anyone if I am exhausted or if something intensely personal is going on in my mind. As you learn to read the human energy system, your first step is to study the principles underlying the practice. And the next is to gain some practical experience. This book provides you with the theoretical concepts and some pointers in exploring your own intuitive abilities. In developing your skill and trying it out in your own life, however, you must trust your gut responses, a fact that I cannot emphasize enough. The first principle, biography becomes biology, page 40. According to energy medicine, we are all living history books. Our bodies contain histories, every chapter, line, and verse of every event and relationship in our lives. As our lives unfold, our biological health becomes a living, breathing, biographical statement that conveys our strengths, weaknesses, hopes, and fears. Every thought you have had has traveled through your biological system and activated a physiological response. Some thoughts are like depth charges, causing a reaction throughout the body. A fear, for instance, activates every system of your body. Your stomach tightens, your heart rate increases, and you may break into a sweat. A loving thought can relax your entire body. Some thoughts are more subtle, and still others are unconscious. Many are meaningless and pass through the body like wind through a screen, requiring no conscious attention. And their influence upon our health is minimal. Yet each conscious thought, and many unconscious ones, does generate a physiological response. All our thoughts, regardless of their content, first enter our systems as energy. Those that carry emotional, mental, psychological, or spiritual energy produce biological responses that are then stored in our cellular memory. In this way, our biographies are woven into our biological systems, gradually, slowly, every day. The story of a young patient of Norm's is a good example of how this process works. Norm called me for a phone consultation on this patient, a dentist, who was not feeling well in general and was becoming increasingly exhausted. He had an acute pain around the right side of his abdomen, and he was also seriously depressed. Increasing and continual exhaustion that takes the edge off mental and emotional clarity is an energy symptom that indicates something is wrong in the body. Most people do not consider it a symptom because it is not actually painful. But when exhaustion continues, even when the person is getting more sleep, the body is trying to communicate that the person is energetically ill. Responding to this message at the energy stage can often prevent a development of an illness. Depression is another symptom that all is not well. Within the clinical world, depression is generally considered an emotional and mental disorder, but prolonged depression often precedes the development of a physical illness. In energy terms, depression literally is a release of energy, or life force, if you will, without consciousness. If energy is like money, depression is like opening your wallet and announcing, I don't care who takes my money or how it is spent. Prolonged depression inevitably creates chronic exhaustion. If you don't care who spends your money or how much, inevitably you will end up broke. So without energy, you cannot support your health. As Norm examined his dentist patient, he had the feeling that the man was developing an illness because of the man's abdominal pain. Norm ran tests for pancreatic cancer, but they came back negative. So he called me for a consultation. As is our habit, he gave me only the patient's name and age and said nothing about the pain or his own suspicions. In my evaluation, I saw that the right side of this patient's body, around the pancreas, was generating toxic energy. I told Norm that this man was burdened by an enormous feeling of responsibility and that it had become more a constant source of anguish for him. He felt intensely that he was unable to live as he wanted to, and he dwelled on this feeling almost to the exclusion of any other emotion. Obviously, we all have negative feelings, but not all negativity produces a serious physical illness. To create disease, negativity has to become the dominant emotion, as it did with this young dentist. After I'd shared this evaluation with Norm, I told him that the patient had pancreatic cancer. Norm admitted that he had already suspected that disease, but the test came back as all clear. He said goodbye and returned to his patient. He recommended to the dentist that he evaluate how well his life's work was serving him. More than likely, Norm said he would have to make some changes to get what he wanted. The patient admitted that he wanted to leave dentistry, but he felt he couldn't go into something else because of the impact his decision would have on his dependents. Norm didn't tell him that he had the energy frequency of pancreatic cancer, but he talked with him about his career frustrations and tried to help him shift his negative attitude. Unfortunately, the man was unable to act on Norm's advice. He defined responsibility as an obligation to care for others to the exclusion of himself, and he was unable to reconceptualize a life that included self-care and self-fulfillment as well. 2 weeks later, this young man's primary physician repeated the test for pancreatic cancer, and this time they proved positive. The man was operated on immediately, but he died within 4 months of his surgery. It sometimes takes a concerted effort to shift your mind to allow yourself to heal. While the dentist could not accept that his professional sadness and feeling of entrapment were changing his body chemistry and health, it was easier for others to recognize these patterns in him. Accepting the idea that every part of your life, from your physical history to your relationships to every attitude, opinion, and belief you carry inside yourself, affects your biological makeup is only part of the healing process, however. You also have to get that acceptance to move from the mental level into the physical level, into your body, to feel the truth viscerally and cellularly and believe it wholly. It is very easy to learn something new and apply that knowledge only casually. The idea that biography becomes biology implies that we participate to some degree in the creation of illness. But, and this is a crucial point, we must not abuse this truth by blaming ourselves or any patients for becoming ill. People rarely choose consciously to create an illness. Rather, illnesses develop as a consequence of behavioral patterns and attitudes that we do not realize are biologically toxic until they have already become so. Only when illness forces us to review our attitudes do we come close to comprehending that our day-to-day fearful and bitter attitudes are, in fact, biologically negative substances. Again, we all have negative feelings, but not all negativity produces disease. To create disease, negative emotions have to be dominant, and what accelerates the process is knowing the negative thought to be toxic, but giving it permission to thrive in your consciousness anyway. For instance, you may know you need to forgive someone, yet you decide that remaining angry gives you more power. Remaining obsessively angry makes you more likely to develop a disease because the energy consequence of a negative obsession is powerlessness. Energy is power, and transmuting energy into the past by dwelling on painful experiences and events drains power from your present-day body and can lead to illness. Power is essential for healing and for maintaining health. Attitudes that generate a feeling of powerlessness not only lead to low self-esteem, but also deplete the physical body of energy and weaken overall health. Thus, the next principle to explore is the primary significance of power for health. The second principle Personal power is necessary for health. One day, Norm called me to do an evaluation of a woman who was suffering from depression and chronic pain in her neck and lower back. Norm asked me if I felt that she would benefit from various electromagnetic treatments. I said absolutely not. She hasn't enough power in her system to benefit from those devices. This was the first time I had ever commented on a person's power in relation to healing. Norm asked me to elaborate, and only then did I realize what I had just said. Suddenly, I had an entirely different sense of the human energy system, and as expression of personal power. I explained to Norm that this woman's attitude had caused her to lose power in her life. She felt inadequate, I said, was always looking for approval, and had tremendous fear of being alone. Her self-esteem was based only on her ability to control others, primarily her children. Her fears and inadequacies were like a black hole, magnetically drawing everyone, particularly her children, toward it, only to crush them eventually. She continually criticized her children in any attempt to keep them dependent on her, since weak children find it difficult to leave the nest. She found flaws in their every accomplishment, whether scholastic or sports-related, because she could not risk empowering them with emotional support, because controlling others requires a tremendous investment of energy, and because she actually felt in control. She never actually felt in control. She was continually exhausted. Her chronic pain was also the result of her inability to control others. By the time she arrived in Norm's office, she looked defeated. This woman could not cope with the inevitability of her children leaving home, yet she denied that she acted in anything but her children's best interest. In her own view, she was a supportive mother because she provided her children with a clean home, healthy food, and decent clothing, yet she systematically strove to undermine their emotional development, a fact that she could not admit. Since conventional medical treatments had not helped her, Norm was considering an alternative approach that included psychotherapy, cranial stimulation through an electrical device, and color and light therapy. If she had used these techniques, I realized she might have benefited for a week or maybe a month, but she would not heal completely until she gave up her pathological struggle for control. That afternoon, I saw that for an alternative therapy to succeed, the patient must have an internal concept of power, an ability to generate internal energy and emotional resources, such as a belief in his or her self-sufficiency. This woman had only an external concept of power, which she drew from an external source, her children. This patient could certainly go to psychotherapy sessions, but unless she confronted the truth about herself, she would only be chronicling in her complaints for an hour each week. No actual healing would take place. As M. Scott Peck has pointed out in People of the Lie, and The Road Less Traveled, seeing and admitting the truth about ourselves, about our role in creating our own problems, and about how we relate to others is vital for healing. Evaluating this woman gave me insight into the role of power in our lives and our energy systems. Power is at the root of the human experience. Our attitudes and belief patterns, whether positive or negative, are all extensions of how we define, use, or do not use power. Not one of us is free from power issues. We may be trying to cope with feelings of inadequacy or powerlessness, or we may be trying to maintain control over people or situations that we believe empower us, or we may be trying to maintain a sense of security, a synonym for power, in personal relationships. Many people who lose something that represents power to them, money or a job or game, or who lose someone in whom their sense of self or power is vested, a spouse or lover, parent or child, develop a disease. Our relationships to power is at the core of our health. Consider the first principle, that biography becomes biology. Together with this second principle, that personal power is necessary for health, Power mediates between our internal and external worlds, and as it does so, it communicates in a language of myth and symbol. Consider, for example, the most common symbol of power, money. When a person internalizes money as a symbol of power, its acquisition and control becomes symbolic of that person's health. When she acquires money, her biological system receives the signals that power is coming to her body. Her mind transmits the unconscious message, I have money, therefore I am safe, I am secure, I have power, and all is well. This positive message transmuted in the biological system generates health. Of course, making lots of money doesn't guarantee health, but poverty, powerlessness, and illness are undeniably linked. When you have trouble making money or you suddenly lose money, your biological system may weaken. I recall one man who during the mid-1980s seemed to have had the Midas touch. His company was increasingly successful, and he had the energy of 10 people. He worked late hours, socialized until the early morning, then showed up for work before everyone else, always alert, cheerful, and on top of things. Then, in October of '87, the stock market crashed, and his company collapsed along with it. Within months, his health deteriorated. He developed migraines, and then lower back pain, and finally, a fairly serious bowel disorder. He could no longer tolerate his late hours or his social schedule. He withdrew from all activities besides maneuvering the survival of his financial empire. This man was unaware that he had calibrated his health to money-making. But when he became ill, he saw the connection immediately. He realized that for him, money represented freedom and the ability to lead a lifestyle that he had always dreamed about. When he lost his fortune, he lost his power, and in only a matter of weeks, his biology crashed too. Certainly, the stress of recovering a business would weaken anyone, but this man had undergone just as much stress when his company was on the rise, and that type of stress had empowered him. Each of us has numerous power symbols, and each such symbol has a biological counterpart. The dentist with pancreatic cancer had a symbol of power, his job. But since he had grown to despise his job, he was losing power each day. The power drain created a biological response that continued until it created a terminal disease. Our lives are structured around power symbols: money, authority, title, beauty, security. The people who fill our lives and the choices we make each moment are expressions and symbols of our personal power. We often hesitate to challenge a person who we believe holds more power than we do. And we frequently agree to the things because we believe we haven't the power to refuse. In countless situations and relationships, the underlying dynamic at work is the negotiation of power, who has it, and how we can maintain our share of it. Learning the symbolic language of energy means learning to evaluate the dynamics of power in yourself and others. Energy information is always truthful. Although a person may verbally agree to something in public, his energy will state how he really feels, and his real feelings will find their way into a symbolic statement. Our biological and spiritual systems always seek to express truth, and they will always find a way to do so. You need to become conscious of what gives you power. Healing from any illness is facilitated by identifying your power symbols and your symbolic and physical relationship to those symbols, and heeding any messages from your body and intuitions are sending you about them. The third principle: you alone can help yourself heal. Energy medicine is a holistic philosophy that teaches, I am responsible for the creation of my health. I therefore participated at some level in the creation of this illness. I can participate in the healing of this illness by healing myself, which means simultaneously healing my emotional, psychological, physical, and spiritual well-being. Healing and curing are not the same thing. A cure occurs when one has successfully controlled or abated the physical progression of an illness. Curing a physical illness, however, does not necessarily mean that the emotional and psychological stresses that were a part of the illness were also alleviated. In this case, it is highly possible and often probable that an illness will recur. The process of curing is passive, that is, the patient is inclined to give his or her authority over to the physician and prescribed treatment, instead of actively challenging the illness and reclaiming health. Healing, on the other hand, is an active and internal process that includes investigating one's attitudes, memories, and beliefs with the desire to release all negative patterns that prevent one's full emotional and spiritual recovery. This internal review inevitably leads one to review one's external circumstances in an effort to recreate one's life in a way that serves activation of will. The will to see and accept truths about one's life and how one has used one's energies, and the will to begin to use energy for the creation of love, self-esteem, and health. The language of conventional medicine sounds more military than that of energy medicine. The patient was attacked by a virus or a substance contaminated the cell tissue, resulting in a malignancy. Conventional medical philosophy considers the patient an innocent or virtually powerless victim who has suffered in an unprovoked attack. In a conventional medical treatment, the patient follows a program prescribed by the physician so that the responsibility for healing lies with the doctor. Whether the patient cooperates with his provider is certainly noted during such treatment, but his attitude is considered unimportant in the process. Drugs and surgery are to do most of the work. By contrast, in holistic therapies, the patient's willingness to participate fully in his own healing is necessary for its success. Holistic and conventional medicine take two different attitudes towards power, active and passive. The chemical treatments of a conventional medicine require no conscious participation of the part of the patient, but a holistic technique like visualization is enhanced by an active and involved patient. An energy connection occurs, in other words, between the consciousness of the patient and the healing capacity of the therapy, and sometimes even of the therapist. When a person is passive with an attitude of just do it to me, he does not fully heal. He may recover, but he may never fully deal with the source of his illness. Acquisitioners. The mother with depression and chronic neck and back pain is an example of someone with only passive power. This kind of dependent person feels she must acquire power from her external environment and from or through someone else. She thinks consciously or unconsciously, alone I am nothing. Such a person seeks to acquire power through money, social status, political, social, military, or religious authority, and relationships with influential people. She does not directly express her own needs, but becomes skilled at tolerating or manipulating unsatisfactory situations. In the human energy system, our individual interactions with our environment can be thought of symbolically as electromagnetic circuits. These circuits run through our bodies and connect us to external objects and other people. We are drawn to power objects or people or power targets so that we can draw their power into our system. Our connection with the power target, however, draws some power away from our own field into the target. At first, I thought of these energy circuits as symbolic, but I have come to believe that they are actually real pathways of energy. So often I hear people comment that they feel hooked on a person or an experience from their past. Some people remark that they feel drained after being with a certain person or in a particular environment. These common words, in fact, come closer than they may think to describing the interaction of our energy field with our environment. When people say they are hooked on someone or something in a negative way, or are over-identifying with an object or possession, they are unconsciously conducting an intuitive diagnosis. They are identifying how they are losing power. I call such people acquisitioners. The most extreme type of acquisitioner is the addict. Regardless of the type of addiction a person has, be it to drugs, alcohol, or the need to control others, their energy circuits are so thoroughly connected to the target that they no longer have the use of their own reasoning ability. One case that tragically illustrates the energy consequences of an addiction came to my attention during a workshop in Denmark for people who were either HIV positive or had developed AIDS. A woman there named Anna had become HIV positive as a result of her occupation, prostitution. Anna had the demeanor of a little girl and was extremely petite. She also limped because 4 weeks before, several of her ribs had been broken by one of her clients. At one point during the workshop, I was discussing what a person needs to do in order to heal a serious illness. I mentioned that addictions such as tobacco, drugs, and alcohol detract from a person's healing process. During a break, Anna came up to me and said, "But Carolyn, how bad could it be to smoke only 2 cigarettes per day?" As I looked at her, I realized that if I were holding the cure for AIDS in my left hand and a cigarette in my right, and I said to her, "Pick the one you want," her mind would have chosen the cure for AIDS, but all of her energy circuits would have gone directly to the one cigarette. I cannot emphasize this point strongly enough. The targets to which acquisitioners connect their energy circuits are people or objects to which they have surrendered their power, specifically the power to control them. Anna's addiction to cigarettes maintained more authority over her than her desire to heal. Unaccustomed to making empowering choices for herself, she was tied into a pattern of releasing her energy into the hands of others, most often her pimp and her cigarettes, the 2 power targets that controlled her entirely. Healing was beyond her reach because her power now existed outside of the boundaries of her physical body. Our minds cannot easily compete with our emotional needs. Anna knew very well that both her occupation and her addiction to cigarettes were hazardous to her health, but she still craved tobacco emotionally because she believed it relaxed her, and she remained involved with her pimp because she believed that he took care of her. Anna's mind had rationalized her emotional attachment, and it was trying to negotiate her healing process by proposing that 2 cigarettes could not possibly harm her health. Unable to pull away from her addictions, Anna was unable to regain her power to heal. It is not the mind, but our emotional needs that control our attachment to our power targets. The famous adage, "The heart has reasons that reasons knows not of," captures perfectly this dynamic. Acquisitioners inevitably find using their intuition extremely difficult. So, attached to their self-esteem is the opinion of their power target that they automatically negate any information that their own intuition transmits to them. Clear intuition requires the ability to respect your own impressions. If you need another person to validate your own impressions, you interfere tremendously with your ability to intuit. Since healing is non-negotiable, acquisitioners find healing a more formidable challenge than people who have a sense of active power. Healing is, above all, a solo task. No one can heal on behalf of another person. We can assist others to be sure, but no one can for another person. No one can, for instance, forgive someone on behalf of someone else. Nor can any of us cause someone to release the painful memories or experiences that he needs to release in order to heal. Because the very nature of passive power is power through attachments. It runs contrary to an acquisitioner's entire biology to release or detach himself from targets that are draining his energy. Acquisitioners are almost programmed for conventional medical treatment. It is not necessarily always negative. Conventional treatment is the most appropriate form of healing for them as long as they remain passive. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of chapter 1 as much as I did. I will be finishing this chapter on the next episode.